And hello, everyone. We are live, and I'm excited to do office hours today. We got quite a few really interesting questions. So this should be a good time. Let me just grab this link really quick. I do not pay attention to the chat over here. You're welcome to chat over there if you want to, but I don't stay on this page. If you want to participate, then you will join the Discord. You can go to kcd.im/office hours and you'll find all the links to everything there, and you can join our Discord and chat in here. This is where I take questions. I also don't take questions in the Zoom chat. So if you're in the Zoom meeting, don't chat your questions in there, you chat them in here. And that way we keep a record of those questions. And yeah, let me just grab this URL really quick and close that. And let me notify people, notify office hours. We are starting now. YouTube live stream and recording. And yes, this will be recorded after. And then I keep forgetting what the Zoom short URL is. So let me copy that. And so Zoom link, there we go. Okay, and I will pin this. Oh yeah, pin it. Okay, so we've got quite a few interesting questions today. The way that this works is the people who are in the Zoom meeting at the time of the office hours, they get priority. And so if we run out of questions in the Zoom meeting, then I go to the Discord, and yeah, it should be a good time. I think that I need to make a marker for when the questions that I will answer. I think it's starting right here. Nope, that was just a comment. It starts right here.
I have one before. I think it's on 17th. So
oh,
after
okay.
the last comment or not.
Actually, hold on one second. I am dad right now. Just one second. This shouldn't take long. Sorry about that. Super unfortunate timing, the way that worked out. Okay, Yago, you said you had a question, and I actually, now that I think about it, I do remember seeing that you had this question. Where does it start? Is it?
I marked it for you. Yeah, this one.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let me take a look at this. Why creating and trying to access proxy like this in React, and it ends up freezing the browser, causing an infinite loop. If I uncomment the proxy count thing. Okay, so are you using like an actual ES proxy, or is this? Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, so and you said it's right here is where it causes the infinite loop.
This.
Okay, so I'm not gonna trigger that. I'll take your word for it. And we are just accessing proxy.count. So when that happens, we're gonna call the getter, which is here's our. I don't remember what this object is called. It's like a configuration for our proxy. But anytime any property is gotten on this object, then we're going to call this function. And we're going to use the reflection API to get on the target. We'll get that specific value. And I can't remember. It's been such a long time since I've used proxies. In fact, I've never actually used proxies. I've only taught how the API works because I've never really had a solid use case for proxies. But this all looks in order from what I remember. And somehow this is triggering an infinite loop. Are you seeing this log when the
Yeah,
infinite loop happens?
yeah, it logs like infinitely, and it seems like for different targets or props, I don't remember. It seems like it's propagating through like some sort of inheritance. I'm not the it keeps changing. I feel uncommon that it's easier to see, but it's gonna freeze for sure.
Okay. I wonder. Um, I wonder if this has anything to do with React. I kind of feel like it wouldn't. Here you're calling re-render. That's interesting. This is just to force an update whenever we set a value. So you're trying to create a mutation as an API for re-rendering. Is that right?
Yeah, just playing around trying to make it work.
Yeah. Okay. And use instance. So right here, use instance is going to be calling this function. So you're going to be creating a new proxy every render. It's going to ignore them, but you are calling this function on every render. So that's something to keep in mind. What you'd probably want to do here, this is tangential, but you'd
Yeah,
probably,
I did with use state 2, just so I'm sure it's not gonna create another one. I used the lazy initializer. Still the same issue.
yeah, I wouldn't expect this would be substantively different. Yeah, so that will be safe. But let's see. Yeah, what's interesting to me is that this getter, I don't believe that this would trigger. Here, let's see what happens if I comment out the re-render thing really quick. And then I'm gonna bring this in. And actually, you know what? I never trust Code Sandbox for stuff like this. Code Sandbox only works for the very simplest of things. I feel bad saying this because I love the Code Sandbox team, but boy, it just is not reliable for anything more than really, really simple stuff. I've had so many problems with it. So, and it's really sad because I really think it's awesome conceptually. So anyway, let's just get this running locally so that I don't have to deal with Code Sandbox weirdness. Yeah, I wish I had been doing this earlier.
If you went to the code sandbox there, you could see like it went like
Yeah, I saw it had like
30,000 logs.
3,600 logs. Yeah. Yeah, but that's part of the thing. It's like I don't know if those were like legit or if Code Sandbox was just doing something weird because I don't trust its log either. It also has performance problems in the log that I've noticed in the past. So yeah, we'll just see what it looks like locally. In fact, often when I notice weird things happening that are unexpected and it's happening in a Code Sandbox, my first thought is it's very possible this is only a Code Sandbox issue. So we'll see if that's. Have you tried this locally?
No, I haven't. I just played around on the sandbox. But
Yeah. So
for sure, the next time there's something like this happens, I'm gonna eject from that and try locally.
yeah, I'm gonna. Half of me feels like this is just gonna magically work now, but it's very possible it won't. So we'll keep looking. Now that's interesting. We're not seeing anything on the screen. Our index is rendering the app. Oh, interesting thing to keep in mind is we are using strict mode, so it is going to trigger 2 renders. That's very strange. And it looks like it's saying we don't even have React on the page. So that makes me wonder, it's weird. There's our root. And we are loading JavaScript. What the heck? There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been like a few. Oh.
Okay, cool. So my guess is all of this issue was just Code Sandbox.
Nice. Thanks. Anyways.
Yeah. You
Now
could
I
file
know.
an issue with them, but like honestly, I filed so many issues with Code Sandbox, and I finally just given up. And it is so frustrating because it promises so much, and yeah, I feel bad at this point. Okay, great. So that answers your question. Interesting idea. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so somebody just asked in the Zoom chat if you can ask questions here. You absolutely can. Unmute yourself and ask the question. If you want to type it out, then don't do it in the Zoom chat. You do it in the Discord, because I want to keep a record of those kinds of questions. So,
how do you want to do?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So my question is, so I'm trying to mock a React router, and I'm trying to submit like a specific form, and when the submit is done, I'd like to redirect the user from that main route to the other. I will post the snippet on the Discord, and you can debug if you want.
Sure. Where is it?
1 second.
Oh, okay. While you're doing that, I think Kevin had a question.
Mine might be a little bit longer form, so you can go back
okay.
to him, but it's a little bit theoretical or academic. But the basis of it is around model-based testing. I followed David K a lot, and I use XState and all that stuff, but I haven't jumped into model-based testing. And I'm looking to see what your thoughts are on that, and like actually practically, how do you get started with it? Cast the example.
Well, so I can answer your question really quickly. I haven't done model-based testing, and so I don't have much to say other than like I've talked with David about it and watched some talks and things like that. And I think it's a really awesome and interesting idea. It's definitely one of those things that you can get carried away with and have a test suite that really literally tests every permutation and takes hours to run because there are so many permutations, and you can very quickly get into over testing. But if you bridle that a little bit, then I think it can be really, really valuable. I'm of the opinion that the fewer tests that you have to write manually, the better. So what it all comes down to is how much confidence are the tests giving you, and how can you limit the amount of time you spend writing and maintaining those tests. And if model-based testing can help you maintain your level of confidence or even increase it without having to commit any additional time, then I'm super for it. So hopefully that helps. Good luck.
Thanks.
Okay, Ismail, we've got, I actually saw this a few minutes ago. I haven't been able to look at it yet. Well, let's take a look. So this test is hanging. Okay, so you do get a console log in the MSW handler.
Yep, in the post request.
Got it. Okay. Yes. So what's likely happening here is, without seeing the implementation, I can't really say, but I have seen this happen before where I'll create a history and I'll render my app with the history, but then my components are interacting with the actual history. So here you're creating a memory history, but then the components interact with the like window location. And so you have two histories going on here, and that's why it won't re-render. And so that's one problem, and there's ways to solve that, but I would actually recommend don't create a memory history. I used to recommend doing it this way, but I don't anymore. And if you look at the Bookshelf app, then you can see exactly the way that I recommend this. And actually, Nick was asking about this earlier, so I don't know if you've had a chance to look at this further or not, but the way that I do it is here's my custom render function that it kind of has the same sort of API as React Testing Library render. Takes some UI, it takes some options, takes the rest of those options. So here you can specify the route and the user. If you don't specify a user, then we're going to create one for you automatically. And then we use window.history push state. And so we can set the route to whatever you want it to be. And if you don't provide one, then we'll just go to the main route of our app. And then we use React Testing Libraries render with the UI, and we provide a wrapper, which is our app providers. Now, what's interesting about these app providers is they're coming from context. This is not a node module. This is just because the way I have things set up, it is referencing this context index.js. And so our app providers right here, this is literally what the real app is running when it, so my tests run the exact same app providers component as my app runs. And this is just an enormous benefit to this approach. So I don't, like, if I need to add a new theme provider or any other global providers that every application or every component in my app are going to be using, then I just add it right here, and then that automatically gets added to the wrapper for all of my tests as well. So I never have to think about tests versus app. It's always the exact same. This is a huge benefit. And one of the things that I am rendering in there naturally is my browser router from React Router DOM. And so that's why I have to use this window history push state. But what this means is I don't have to worry about creating a in-memory history and worrying about the problems that you're talking about. It's all just exactly the same, both in app and in the real environment and the test environment. So this is what I recommend. And in testingjavascript.com, this is what I show in the material there. So yeah, this is what I'd recommend you give it a shot. Try to just render the exact same providers, like global providers component as your wrapper argument. And then that should hopefully solve your problem.
Yeah, I did find that on the documentation of this library. I'm wondering, can you pass the search prop as well? Because the initial route has some search parameters.
Yeah, you totally can. So when you do this right here, so if I were to call render and I could specify a route with query params, and that would totally work.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Good luck.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'll post it in the Discord. So I'm working on an application, and I want to use the React Testing Library render function. And I have a providers component that there's like all the context providers, just like you just showed.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get that custom render function set up with TypeScript, because right now it doesn't have any types.
Yeah. So I haven't done this yet. So I don't have experience to answer your question, but you could, yeah, I'm not sure. I would ask on the TypeScript channel on Discord to see if anybody else has done this. I'm sure that somebody has done it. I just haven't done it yet. So I have some things that I would try, but I'm guessing you've already tried those things and they're not working. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask. So
Okay,
yeah.
well, thanks anyway.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I'll just tell you what I'm thinking off the top of my head. I actually don't really know what the types are for testing library React, because I didn't write those and I haven't really used those yet. But my thinking is that if we don't explicitly export the render types, including like the parameters and everything, then you can still use the parameter built-in utility in TypeScript to say, hey, get me the parameters for this parameter types for this function. And then you can use the first parameter type for that first argument. And then in this case, you're not actually accepting any more argument or options. And so you could just say the second parameter type. And in fact, I think you could probably just say, hey, this function is the same type as this. So in fact, you might be able to get away with render is type of RTL render, and then here's your custom render. That, I think that should probably work. But if you wanted to add options, then that's not going to work. And presumably that's what you'll eventually end up doing, is you'll add specific options for your render. And so in that case, then you'd say, hey, take the first parameter or the type of the first parameter of RTL render, and that's this one, and then the type of the second parameter, and then union that with your additional options. And that
Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah.
The argument of the first argument UI is easy because it's just React elements.
Yeah. Yeah, so that one should be okay.
Okay, well, thanks.
For me, it's more than just saying, oh, I know what this type is going to be. It's a UI element. And it's also communicating that I'm literally just trying to wrap RTL render. And so that's why I would say, let's grab the first parameter of that. And frankly, if it's a lot of work for you to do this, then it might be useful for you to open up an issue and say, hey, I'm trying to wrap this with TypeScript. It's not very easy. How can we make this easier? Because people should be making their own wrappers, and so it would make sense to have them do.
Yeah, okay. I think the only thing that would have to change is you have to export the type of the options from React testing library. Yeah, okay.
I agree with you. I think that's probably what the only thing we need to do. Okay, sweet. Any other questions here in the Zoom?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Hey, Steve.
Hi. Did you see my diagrams that I uploaded?
Oh, yeah. That was, your question was about Redux?
I have some very basic questions about state management. Do those diagrams make any sense? Like, basically, I'm trying to figure out what the difference between context and I've done some a Redux tutorial, but I've never used it in a project. And I'm trying to figure out if that's something I want to use as an alternate to context, or if it's overkill. Because anyway, my question is, if you look at those diagrams, do those make sense? Like basically, if you're using context and you want to get a value from let me look at these diagrams. Okay, are you looking at the context diagram I made?
Yeah, I'm can you see my screen? So, I'm looking at both of your diagrams and trying to parse them.
So basically, if I have a value that I want to get from if I want to get the blue value, into my into the fifth component, I need to make a second context provider. I can't use the one that's above that, because that value is in the God damn it, I can't see the right component.
It's in the second component, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
So I need to make two contexts, correct? Two context providers.
I mean, you could lift the state to the first component and put it in the same context if you wanted to. But I advise to keep separate domains separate. And so if we're talking about, well, I've got my theme here, and then I've got my auth state here, you could technically put them into a single context if you wanted to, but I'd just advise keep them separate.
By the way, we get asked this question pretty much like multiple times on a daily basis at React Flux, and we have a canned answer for it. So if you read the Office Hours channel, I just pasted it there. So that has like a bunch of links of information about recommendations of when you should and when you shouldn't use Redux to implement certain logic. And you can go ahead and ask over on the Redux channel if you're confused about it.
Well, I just had one more question though. Basically, so with Redux though, you wouldn't like, there's just one, basically there's just one context provider, correct? Kind of, I mean, I know it's not, doesn't translate.
Yeah. That,
No, there's a whole bunch of them, I think. And it depends on which version of React Redux you're using.
yeah,
You
but
can
that's
create
like implementation detail. As from the and I think it's not entirely relevant anyway. I'll just answer. I think your underlying question is, should I use Redux, or do I personally advise using Redux? And I typically,
Yeah, I think I've read some articles that you've written that you've kind of maybe advised against it.
Yeah, so let me explain my thoughts on Redux. I've used Redux in applications in the past, and I've seen it used in lots of applications. And every time I've ever seen it or used it, the inevitable thing that happens is all state goes into Redux. And this is not because Redux is not good. It's just because people use Redux wrong. And so that to me says the pit of success is very narrow. So it's very easy to use Redux wrong. This is an opinion of like maybe 2 or 3 years old. Like, so what I mean by that is actually in the last year or so, things have kind of changed. So if you are using Redux Toolkit, then you're totally good. Redux Toolkit puts all the right things in place, and then the only thing that's left after you've adopted Redux Toolkit is just a little rigor in the decision on whether you should put something into the global store or not, which ultimately is like the biggest beef that I have with Redux is people don't do that. But if you can commit yourself and your team to only putting things into Redux that need to be there, and you're using Redux Toolkit, then you're totally cool to just do that. The most important thing of all of this stuff is co-location. Whoops, and I added an S to that when I didn't need to. I've got 2 blog posts on this actually that I will share with you. So whether you're using Context or Redux or Jotai or anything, any of these state management solutions, I think that co-location will make your app faster. It will make your app easier to maintain. And it doesn't really matter what your state management solution is. And in fact, I've actually got another blog post about this on Epic React Dev, where I talk about my state management mistake, which describes the fact that like I started with Redux and I thought it was the cause of all of my problems, and then I switched to something else and I still had my problems. And so yeah, give that a look too, because it's not Redux. Redux isn't the problem. It's just what it
is that a common problem between like all state management? I mean, if people are using MobX or like React Tract or something, do they tend to put all their state in that, or is that just something about Redux that makes people want to
no, I don't think it's specific to Redux. I think Redux just was the lucky one to be the first to make that reasonably possible. Yeah, so like you could suffer from the same problem with Context. I think maybe the difference is that it takes a little bit more work to put stuff in. Well, I don't know, maybe not. Yeah, it just yeah, it really doesn't matter. Like if your state management solution makes it easy for you to put something in a global context, no pun intended, just context in the normal sense of the word. If it enables you to do that, then you do have to take care to make sure that you're not going to wind up with a situation where everything goes into that. You want to co-locate stuff. That's the most important thing with state management, is co-locating it.
All right, and I've got one more tangent question. What is XState? Is that state management also? Is that like Redux or something? XState?
Yeah, it's kind of state management. It's more like how you manage the current state and transitions between states, and it gives you a really predictable way. And other state management libraries are more about how do I manage my global state management, but XState can be used to manage that, but also typically is more useful for individual components that are complex. But yeah, XState is great if you want to get into that. But you could definitely use XState with React Query or something like that too. So And since I've mentioned React Query, that's like the really nice thing is once you use, so if we talk about state co-location, we're trying to put things as close to where they're used as possible. But when we're talking about server state, stuff that's coming from the server, what we have in the client is actually a cache, not state. That's different. You have state on the server, which is the stuff in the database, but then you've got a copy of that in the client. This is a cache. It is not state, different. And so you use React Query to manage that. And then what you have left is what your state is, and you co-locate that. And that's what I would suggest. And Tiger mentioned also Zustand, which I have not personally used more than just a little hello world, but I find it to be very interesting. You could look at that too.
That's kind of sparked one more question, if I can, or
Sure.
if you need to move on. That's okay. Okay. Well, now that you've mentioned React Query, I've looked at React Query, and honestly, I've never really used anything other than Firebase as a backend. And it seems like if you're using like, on Snapshot or whatever with Firebase, it's a real-time database, you like using React Query is kind of superfluous, because I don't really have any problems with caching. I mean, it's so fast. It's
Yeah. If you're happy with the knobs that it gives you to manage the cache and whatever, like Firebase kind of is just like, it almost tries to pretend that there is no cache, and you instantly get the latest version of everything. And
I just save stuff in local storage, so it's super quick.
One thing that React Query. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that, like, I basically save I replicate everything that I save in the Firebase database to my local storage, and I check local storage first, and if it's there, then I just grab it from there, and if not, then I grab it from Firebase. But it's always usually in local storage after the first time, so it's super fast. I don't even need React Query.
I don't know. Based on that alone, I'd say that's overkill, and you should probably just install React Query, because like if you have proper network caching, there's really no reason to use local storage.
But I don't know how to. I don't know.
So Steve, the problem that you're going to run into with that approach is cache invalidation. If you haven't already hit it, then you're going to. And like it is a very difficult problem to know whether the thing you have in local storage is the most up-to-date thing, or the thing that's on Firebase is the most up-to-date. And there are many different approaches to this, and each with its own trade-offs. And if you want to get in the business of cache invalidation and management, then that's great. But if you want to build an app, then I would just nix the whole local storage thing and just go with Firebase and just ignore the local storage thing. So caching has little to do with well, it has something to do with performance. So you keep on saying that it's super fast if I just put it in local storage, and that's true. But there's a lot of consistency issues that you can run into when you do that. So I don't have any more time to dedicate to this, because I know I've got quite a few other questions. So if you all want to continue the conversation in another channel on Discord, that's awesome. And if you want to continue with me next week at Office Hours, then that's cool too. But I've got to move on.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck. Okay, cool. So anybody else who's in the Zoom who wants to ask something before we go to Discord?
Eric?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, so I did implement what you did, and I'm still facing the same issue. Okay,
so why don't you create a reproduction for me, as minimal as you can. Repro, and then you can share that. And if nobody can answer your question in the Discord, then we can talk about it again next week, unless we have some time and you finish it really quick right now. So does that sound okay?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Okay. It's just a lot easier to have something that I can actually run. So, okay.
Hi
there, Peter.
Yeah, I was just wondering, quick question, when you were doing live coding, you did JSON parse with knowledge coalescence to now because of TypeScript. complaining that it shouldn't be done. Like, what are your thoughts about the assertion? Like, it's not
that's actually, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Between these two, I would do the string version. Yeah, actually, so between these three options, I like the string one best. Maybe I'll change it to that. I don't know, this bang thing, I just really, I don't like that for some reason. I think part of it, a big part of it for me is that it's, it looks like JavaScript. It looks like it would be JavaScript syntax, but it's not. And so that bothers me. I think that's the biggest reason I don't like null assertions. And also, this is basically saying, hey, TypeScript, I know that you think this could be null, but I promise you it's not. But that's not the case. It can be null. And so I don't want to use that either. So yeah, good question. Thanks for asking. That actually would make for a good 3 minutes with Kent thing. Maybe I'll talk about that today. Okay, anybody else here in the Zoom call before I scroll through this? Okay, cool. I was actually looking forward to getting to this one. So this will be kind of interesting. So Chester asked if I would set up the bookshelf app environment from scratch. And I haven't tried this. I mean, of course, I built it. So I have done it before, but I haven't like practiced it to see if I can do it quickly. So this might be interesting. But yeah, the bookshelf app itself is, it has some interesting things going on to make it so that it can run 100% offline and locally. And without really complicated setup. Those three things make sorry, let me rephrase that last one. It does have some complicated stuff in it, but it's not complicated for you to set up to get running yourself. Those are the requirements for me. So I'm going to wait. We'll see if this works. We're gonna say npx create React app. I can't remember if you like give it the name of your app before you run that or. Oh, great. Okay, so the name. Let's call this bookshelf. So this is the first step for create React app thing. Now, there are lots of companies that are building create React app applications as their offering and everything, and I think that's fine, especially for applications where like server rendering doesn't matter and performance isn't really a huge thing. Or whatever, I think that's fine. If I were building a consumer-facing application like a Twitter or something like that, then I would absolutely not be using Create React App. But I use it here because the vast majority of people who are building, or a large amount of people who are building React apps can totally use Create React App, and it works great, and there's nothing wrong with it. Oh man, I forgot that set it up with Yarn. Man.
What did you?
Go ahead.
What would you use, Kent, if you were building like a Twitter application, as you mentioned? What would you? Because you said you were not going to use Create React App. Would you use Next.js then, or?
I would use Remix. So,
but like right now, if you had to choose right now, obviously Remix is not.
Yeah, it's not technically production ready. Yeah, so. Yeah, I think it would be a choice between Next and Remix for me. I know that Remix is technically not production ready, but I believe that it will be in the next couple, like month or two. And it doesn't have the community that Next has or whatever, but I really feel like Remix is a solid approach. But there are trade-offs that you're making and stuff, so it really depends. But if I were making a Twitter.com, I think I would go with Remix today. Anyway, so we're getting everything installed with npm because I don't trust Yarn anymore. Yarn betrayed my trust with their Yarn version 2. Boy, that was a disaster. So I mean, hard working engineers, they're amazing. It's awesome. They just made very different trade-offs than I would have. So here we've got all of this stuff. And the first thing that I do is I just get rid of all the things that I don't care about, like this report web vitals. Man, I don't know why that was included by default. But yeah, There it is. Get rid of all this. And then like there's a bunch of tooling stuff that we could set up, and I'm not going to spend all the time to doing that right now. Like I'm talking about ESLint and Prettier and Cypress and stuff like that. We just don't have time to set all of that stuff up, and like the jest stuff. In fact, we do have custom jest config in here, and the only reason that it's custom, literally the only reason is so I can specify my own test path ignore patterns, so that I can run the exercise and final and extra credit like slightly differently. Yeah, and actually some of the exercises don't have the setup test. So there were just like a handful of things that I needed to do differently just because it's a workshop. For anybody else, like you wouldn't need to customize Jest for what we do in the Bookshelf app. So anyway, once we have this going, then we can npm start this thing, and it will pop up the like basic React create React app shell with the spinner thing, which is kind of fun. Learn React. Boy, I wonder who I could pay to make that redirect to Epic React instead of just kidding. Okay, so let's see what's the next thing that we're I wish that Chester were here so he could describe exactly what he wants us to specifically cover. But I guess he just wants to be able to set up the whole environment from scratch. So let's start with the first branch on here and see what it's got, and we'll just work our way toward that first branch. So yeah, we've got the env to set up some of these things. We actually don't need all of those for this first exercise. Really all we need for the first exercise is, let's just take the last version of all this. We're going to copy this and we'll stick it in right here. And then I'm going to need to bring in reach dialog. And we'll get our components logo. Let's get rid of this logo here. We don't need the setup test right now. By the way, setup test, testing library, yes, by default. That's nice. And we'll get rid of, I don't think we even have our index.js. We don't have our app test or app.js either. But we do have a components logo, so let's grab that really quick. Yeah, components logo.js. Put this in there, save this, and get it started. And that's all that you need to get us to the first exercise. So I'm guessing that Chester's mostly wondering about, okay, so once we get to some of these later exercises, we've got a whole backend environment to think about and a bunch of other, yeah, that's actually mostly the most complicated part, is like how the backend environment works. So let's skip ahead to one of the, yeah, let's go to exercise, yeah, data fetching, exercise 3. And that is here. Okay, so for the data fetching stuff, we do have quite a few other things, and most of that happens in this test directory. And so in the test directory, you have a server directory, and you know what? I really feel bad taking time from other people who probably have questions. So I'm just we'll explore this really quick. And Chester, I just don't think that I'll have time to like walk you through exactly what you're wanting, especially if you're not able to show up to the office hours directly. So I'll kind of give you a little tour of where we're at this point. So first, let's talk about how we get to the server in the first place. So if you look at index.js, then we load in this bootstrap file. That's not Twitter bootstrap. This is like all of the things that need to be loaded before the rest of the app is run. So we have this stop runaway React effects hijack. What this is doing is it's, well, you can go Google that. You'll figure out what that does. But then it imports our test server, and then the rest of these are just CSS that we want on the page before our React renders. With server rendering, yeah, those would be like links and stuff. But anyway, we'll go to test server, and this is where things get kind of interesting, because and this is actually like, I literally recommend doing this in your apps. There's just one thing that's different about this one than than what we would do in your app. Yeah. So here we're going to say process env, node env is development. So that means during development, I want you to, I want this file to be what the dev server is. So we're going to module exports require dev server. Otherwise, if it's the test environment, then we're going to use the test server. And this is because MSW has completely different code paths for mocking HTTP requests in the browser versus mocking them in Node. And our tests run in Node. And so we're going to take those two different code paths. That's what the dev and test server are. Otherwise, we're going to assume we're in production. And in a normal application, you would just do nothing. You could just say module exports as an empty string or whatever. It doesn't matter. But because the Bookshelf app production version is actually using MSW, we are actually just going to use the dev server. And so what this does, let's dive into the dev server. What this does is it brings in MSW with setup worker, and it creates a MSW server with our handlers. We'll take a look at those in a second. So these are functions that we write ourselves. And so then we start up the server. We tell it where the service worker lives, and we can, let me just show you where that is really quick. If we go to the public directory and mock service worker JS, that's this. And this is a generated file by MSW. So you just run this script npx msw init public, and that will generate this file right here. So, so we're just saying, hey, this is where we are, or where our mock service worker is. Go load that up, and that file just will intercept any request that's made, and then it will let the client know, hey, this request is made, and then the client will match that request with our handlers that we provided. So let's go take a look at the handlers. So here we define all of our handlers as just an array of a bunch of endpoint handlers. So we've got our auth URL login and auth URL register, and that is this. This is coming from our .env file that I showed you earlier. And so anytime there's a request made to the auth URL /login, then this function will be called instead of actually making the request. And we have this users DB, which we can dive into right here. That's in test data users. Now, unfortunately, my browser plugin thinks that I'm looking for the node module called test. That's not where we're going. So I'm just going to come back up here to test data and then users right here. So this is our data access object, I guess it's our DAO, for interacting with our users database, which is actually all happening in local storage. But what's cool about this is it means that you can run the application looks like it's a legit app, and it has like, there's loading states and everything, and you can make changes, and then you can refresh, and those changes are there. And the experience of building the app feels like you're interacting with a real backend, but it all actually is happening in the in local storage. That's where things are local storage. Here we go. It's where things are actually stored. So there's our users. Yeah, and there you go. My password hash for all this stuff. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how that all works. But that's all backend stuff, and I don't teach that in Epic React. I'm not going to teach you backend stuff. You wouldn't want me to do that anyway. So anyway, we've got a persist thing that persists our stuff. So anytime there's a mutation, we persist it. Anytime we need to get something, we load it. And yeah, and then we also have this purge users utility that you can use on Windows. So if you wanted to do that, you can. And actually, if we go to the Bookshelf app and have the dev tools enabled, then you can go down here and you'll see you've got the React query dev tools in here, which is pretty cool. I'll toggle that on. You can say which request you want to make fail just to test that out. And then we can purge the database. So if I click on this, then all of my users, everything's gone, and I can register a new user. And and then start adding new books and stuff. So that is kind of a handy feature of all of this. And you don't have to worry about connecting to a database or the service goes down or any of that as a learner, which I think is really useful. Anyway, so we have all of the same, like, if you never looked at this file, you would think that this is a like some sort of third-party hosting or a database hosting client library or something, because it has an authenticate, it has a validate, it has create, read, update, delete, all of that stuff right in here. And yeah, so that's kind of how our fake database works. And we have one of these for each one of these, one of our CRUD objects, and then we just have our books all right here as a giant JSON object. And yeah, so you log in, we use this userdb authenticate, and if that authenticates properly, then we'll send the user. If it doesn't, then it's going to throw an error, and then we catch that right in here. So we do this try catch, where we'll say, hey, if the error has a status, then that's going to be the status for our response. Otherwise, we'll just use 500 because we don't know what happened, and then we'll use the error message. So it ends up working really quite nicely here. But all of this stuff is stuff that I wouldn't recommend that you do in production, but I would recommend you do for your testing. And I do teach you how to do some of this stuff. I don't teach you how to create these mock databases and stuff. That would be a whole other workshop, which maybe I could do in the future. But I do show you how to use MSW and for mocking, because I do believe that you should be doing this for your testing. And also it would be like, it's really useful for development as well. So
we even had a use case at work where one of our API was not finished yet at the back end. So we were using mock service worker at the front end because the deadline was quite tight, and it just worked fantastic. And that's actually why we started using it in our company, just because of that specific use case. So
yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, totally. And then what's cool is you can also use this with Storybook too. And so if you've got like components that need to have access to some data or whatever, you don't have to make sure you're even connected to the internet, which that's always my tell on whether I'm interested in using a technology or something is, can I write this code without the internet? Like, could I fly on an airplane or go under a tunnel with no Wi-Fi and continue to work on my stuff? So anyway, so that's how all the server handlers go. So if you're going to build this from scratch, you need to manage everything that we're doing in the test server. You pretty much just copy all of this, but you can explore it yourself if you want to figure out how it works. The test server side is very similar to the dev server. It's just one you're using MSW node, and the other one you're just using regular MSW. And then we also do have a DevTools thing, and I've got a blog post about the DevTools if you want to read more about that. Nope, DevTools, there we go. Make your own DevTools, recommended. So yeah, you can take a look at how the DevTools are set up. It's pretty cool. DevTools are awesome. That's the little thing at the bottom that I was showing you with this thing. Those are the DevTools. Every app should have one of those.
Would you recommend using that for when you use mock service worker for development, or would you always recommend having or what?
So I pretty much like always recommend having some form of DevTools for your app, whether you're using mock service worker or not. Like, and what your DevTools contains will depend on what you're using. So we're using React Query, so I stuck the React Query DevTools in here. That makes sense to be able to do that. We're using MSW, so I made a little thing. And actually, this would be a really cool thing to have built into MSW, is some DevTools React component or something. That would be sick. I would love that. Who wants to work on some open source thing? Do that. That would be awesome. But yeah, I've just made this work with some, like, we save these in local storage, and then all my handlers will check this first before deciding whether to actually make the do the stuff it's supposed to. And then we also like can control like we can set a random percentage of our requests to fail, how long our requests take because they're all mocked. So those are also kind of related to MSW and our mock backend and stuff. And then, yeah, you can enable DevTools by default so that it's always on, which I think can be kind of useful too in production, because by default in production, the DevTools are not enabled and they're not even loaded because like you don't want your users to pay that cost, right? And so to turn them on, you say DevTools is true in the query params, and that will turn on the DevTools, and then you can just check this, and now it's in your local storage. So it's even if you don't have this, the DevTools will be available. So that's what that is. But like when in this blog post that I talk about at a previous company that I had or that I worked at, I made DevTools, and we could choose which backend we were hitting. We could it would show us like build information. So when was this? What commit is this? What was the commit message of that commit? When was this built? Here's a link to the build. A bunch of other stuff that was like, and like feature toggles. You'd have like a whole tab for feature toggles, stuff like that. It was really useful. Anyway, hopefully that was helpful, Chester. I'm not sure what else I can show you and spend time on. But hopefully that kind of gets you jump started if you want to build this whole thing from scratch yourself. What I would suggest is just start with the bootstrap and get yourself in this spot, and then you can go to the next exercise and see the differences between what you have and what is added here, because each like we do sort of build the bookshelf app all together in that workshop, but there's a lot of monotony in like, okay, we're gonna make this component, we're gonna style it again, and like there's not a whole lot of learning there. It's just like do the thing that you did already again, which there is value in doing that, but just for time's sake and value for time's sake, I skip a bunch of stuff between each branch. And so if you want to like literally write every line of code, which is totally, you're welcome to do that. You probably learned quite a bit. Then you will need to say, okay, I got up here to exercise 2. Now we're moving to exercise 3, and there's a bunch of these files that are added. So I would recommend you review what those are doing and then try and implement those yourself. You'll probably learn a lot doing that. So, okay, sorry, that took some time. And I've got 3 minutes left. So what do we have left on our questions in here? Let's see. Any other questions here in Zoom before I look at these?
Not a question, just wanted to let you know that I managed to fix the issue. Thanks a lot.
Woohoo! Congrats, good job.
Thanks.
Hello, Ken.
Yes.
I want to ask a non-technical question.
Sure.
So I want to ask some career suggestion how to grow as a web developer, as a React developer.
Yeah, this is a pretty common question. So I have written a blog post about it. It is how to get experience as a software engineer. And the TLDR is there's no shortcut to getting experience. But you can make sure that the things you spend your time on are contributing the most to your experience. And the long and short of it is you get experience by having experiences. And so you just need to make sure that you're putting yourself in the way of experiences or in the way of the kinds of experiences that you want to have. So when I was at PayPal, we did front end and back end. We have like this middle tier node thing. And we did some server rendering and stuff like that. But there was like interacting with further downstream APIs and stuff like that. I wasn't interested in that layer. I wanted to do all the React stuff. And so when we would do our sprint planning and decide who does what, I would always volunteer for the React stuff because that's where I wanted to spend my time. And so like you optimize the time that you spend for the experiences that you want to have. And that's, yeah. So like if you want to get better at being a React developer, then volunteer for those types of problems and expose yourself to varied problems in that problem space. If you're just doing the same thing over and over again, like maybe you'll have some sort of revelation on a better way to type use state. But there's not a whole lot you can do if you just every single day are just doing the same thing. Like it's not going to get you any better like past a certain point. And so try to broaden your horizons, experience more problems, put yourself in the way of more problems. And open source is a great way to do this too, where like maybe at work, all that your job requires of you is the same stuff that you've been doing, and you're not expanding yourself. And so finding open source things that you can do to kind of expand your horizons a little bit can be helpful too. So hopefully that answers your question. Cool. Anyone else here in Zoom?
My advice is also, if you want to further develop yourself, is to do at work, do a lot of mob and pair programming. I've noticed it works fantastic. What we do in our company, especially me and my tech lead, is that we schedule, and this is, by the way, something I got from a podcast I heard on remotely listening by Netlify with Sarah Drasner and a few others. But we schedule, an appointment. Like, okay, we're gonna pair code for 1 or 2 hours, and then we code on something, and it works fantastic. You do not just get more done, but you learn a lot through the process.
That's not.
Yeah, and live streaming.
One thing I want to ask, thank you. One thing I want to ask, one of my friend is working as a ML developer, and I want to make a project with him. So he is doing ML in Python. So if there is any way I can use do React and Python mix, or he have to use TensorFlow?
No, with Python is completely backend, and so if you just want it to be the REST backend, then you can do a React front end and just consume those APIs. There's nothing wrong with that. You could, with a setup like that, you just do create React app, or if you do need server rendering, then like your Next.js backend or your Next.js server could just hit those backend APIs. So yeah, you can absolutely like, yeah, there's no reason you couldn't have them do Python for the backend and then React for the front end.
By the way, if you did want to do ML in the front end, TensorFlow now has a JavaScript port. It's not nearly as well supported as Python, but like if you wanted to do ML work without learning Python, you could totally do that.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, cool. So Jens, I noticed you had, and I don't know if I'm saying your name right, sorry. I noticed that you had a question about wait for element to be removed. Did you want to ask that?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a few tests. I'll share the link. I need to commit this code. I'm just trying to, I have using React query to fetch an API that I'm just mocking out with MSW. And then first it displays a loader. And then if there's an error, displays the error, and otherwise it displays the data that is fetched. Component. And so I need to wait for the loading element to disappear. And somehow that wasn't working, but I don't have a code example ready. So
yeah, that's okay. I'll just mention to you, and maybe if you can make an example sometime that we could walk through it. But I had a fair amount of trouble getting React query to work well with tests. It was a bit of a pain. It should be a lot better now because of the issues that I raised, but it was difficult. And so if you're struggling, just know that you're not alone and it's not easy. But I did get to a point where I feel pretty good about the way that I handle it. And if you look at the Bookshelf app setup file, then you'll see how I get all of this set up. So here we have our general cleanup. These after eaches are run in reverse order. So this one will run first and then these ones will run. And that actually is important. So my biggest problem with React query was when I was using fake timers. That was an enormous problem because if you what happened was I would start fake timers, and then React Query would set up all of its timers, and then I would finish the test, but React Query still had some timers hanging around, and then I would stop the fake timers. And so those timers that were hanging around never went to completion, and just so many things went wrong because of that. And so that's what this does. So I don't know if you were using fake timers. If you're not, then it's probably something else.
Well, I think I forgot to add the query cache.clear. I think that might be the problem.
Yeah, that could also that's, I think, I don't know how, like, what their documentation for testing is, but they should probably do this in their testing documentation. So yeah, hopefully that is helpful. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just paste that there just in case anybody needs it. Okay, so we are over time. I was expecting to go over time. We had a lot of really good questions queued up, and y'all just showed up and asked some great questions. So let me see if I can get through a couple last things. Kevin and I talked about model-based testing already.
I do have a quick question related to testing. It's when you have E2E tests with Cypress, and you also have integration tests. How many of the cases should you cover? Should you cover the same cases in both integration and the E2E tests, or what is your recommendation for that?
Yeah, so I've got a blog post that kind of lays out the different layers of testing in general, and kind of where I put what. And so there is very likely, well, there absolutely will be overlap, 100%. Like if you're building a calculator and you unit test the addition functionality, and then you do an end-to-end test that does a bunch of calculations, you're going to test the same thing that you did in your unit test. And this is just like a fact that you have to embrace and say, okay, that's the way it is. So given that, what, like, you need to decide, do I need to have these lower level tests? And if those lower level tests are covering edge cases that are either difficult or just too time consuming to test with an end-to-end test or a higher level test, that's when you drop down your level of testing. And so you have to be okay with doing a little bit of overlap. It's going to happen, but you need to think about what is the confidence that I'm trying to get, and can this level of testing get me that confidence? If it can't, then let's go to a next to the level of testing that can get me that confidence.
This question actually came because I was looking how I would mock the scroll behavior of a user using I can send you this using testing library. And then in the issue you said that we should instead you would have used Cypress for that case when it comes to scrolling.
Yep, I would.
That's why I just asked.
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
sounds nice.
So this is kind of a different problem though. So the reason that I would use Cypress isn't because it end-to-end tests are better for testing this type of an experience, but because testing in a real browser is better for testing this kind of experience. Because JS DOM, which is a simulated DOM in Node, does not yet and may never support layout. And that means, like, sure, we have DOM nodes in here, but where do they appear on the page relative to each other? So like client height and all of that stuff is just not existent in JS DOM. And so if that is what you're trying to test, that's a behavior you're trying to test specifically, then using Cypress, you're probably better off. Now, you can mock some of that stuff out. And I do this actually in Downshift, in the Downshift tests, unless it's been changed. It's been a couple of years since I did anything, any Downshift stuff. But let's see if I can find, I think maybe in the miscellaneous tests, if those are still a thing. Yep. Maybe down here, you might have to search around here a little bit, but we do have a couple of tests where we're testing the location of stuff. Yeah, I'm not going to spend time looking for it, but I'm sure you can find it. And so you can see how you could mock out some of the scroll position and stuff like that. But
that will give you less confidence.
yeah, exactly. Because you're testing your mocks, which is sort of okay. There's merits to mocking, but yeah, given that Cypress gives you a good enough experience for most types of testing, then just use Cypress for that, for anything that you need an actual browser to do. Okay,
thank
cool.
you.
Yeah. Let's see, where did we leave off? Right here. Okay. Is this okay? Oh yeah. So Chester, this is, oh yeah, Yagos explained it. Okay. What do I think of Rescript? Rescript is, oh yeah, wasn't this, previously known as Reason. I keep forgetting they rebranded as Rescript. So I did Hello World in Reason, and I thought it was really interesting, very cool. I don't think that it'll ever really take off. This is going to be very similar to like Elm and maybe PureScript and stuff like that, where they're kind of offshoots. JavaScript is going to dominate. TypeScript will dominate because it's basically JavaScript. When you go so far off to a completely different language, I don't think that it's going to really take off. Now, that doesn't mean that if you use it, you're not going to be successful. I'm sure you'll be happy and love it and everything. But yeah, I don't really see Rescript as really taking off. But I do think it's cool. It's interesting. Okay.
Hi, Kent.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, can you tell me about the React Redux Saga and Redux Thug?
Nope, I can't. I don't know much about it. Sorry.
I recommend asking in Reactive Flux Discord channel. It's amazing.
There are probably a lot of people who could tell you about it. Yeah. Okay. The new use selected context. This is the first time I've heard of this. So thank you for sharing. 12 hours ago. Yeah. The React team doesn't reach out to me about stuff anymore. But yeah, I'm sure that it's awesome. It looks like Eric's in here, and Daishi, he works on Joe Tai and a couple other things in the React Spring world.
Yeah, Zostand as well.
Yeah, and Zostand. Yep. Yeah, it seems like very focusing specifically on the problems that they're trying to solve. So Redux and like state management, external state management. I'm guessing that this is an evolution of the use mutable source or something. It's probably I guess. Looking at the usage, that looks awesome. This is actually very similar to my React performance exercise, where we create a higher order component. This is, I can't remember what exercise it is. So let's find out. Yeah, perf death by 1,000 cuts. This is exercise 6, final 6, extra 3, I think. Yeah, so state slice. So I have this with state slice thing that allows you to say, hey, this cell is going to use my state, my global state, and here's a function that you can use to get the part of the state that it cares about. And so this is a hook version of that, which means that it's better, way better. And I think that's great. So yeah, that's exciting. I'll look forward to teaching people that if it actually lands, because I think that's awesome. And then I can get rid of this terrible higher order component nonsense. So good stuff. Thanks for sharing that. Fire emoji. Roles and permissions. Yeah, I don't have any resources to give you for that. I wonder if the React security here, actually I've got on my blog post, I've got authentication, this one.
Yeah, I think they can use lazy import with suspense.
Sorry, what was that?
I think they can use lazy import with the suspense.
Yeah, sorry. What are you referring to?
The question of Aumile.
I don't think this is, that's what they're asking. Yeah, they seem to be asking about handling roles and permissions, which maybe they'll lazy load stuff that people get later. But yeah, I think that's kind of a different question. But anyway, if we come down here to the bottom, there's Ryan Schenke has an authentication course that you can get, and it's his React security course. And here, he might cover some of this stuff. So this is not an area that I cover myself, but yeah, maybe give that a look as a resource for managing that sort of thing. Check out the developer tools of Redux with Redux Toolkit app. Maybe you could set up the toolkit. That would be cool. Or yeah, you got a friend here. Nice. Lots of really helpful comments here. What use cases do you believe state machine a good idea and what not? So here's the interesting thing. Everything is a state machine, basically. And so it's not like you're choosing whether to use a state machine. It's, are you choosing to model that state machine so that you can't get into, so that your code doesn't get into a impossible state situation. So React Query is built on state machines. I believe they've recently changed that. A lot of Reach UI is built modeling state machines. Yeah, so like you are, what you are building has a state machine behind it. Whether you model that state machine is the question. And sometimes it may be worth it to you to model it. It's probably worth it to you more often if you know how to model it well. Like if you're used to modeling state machines, then you're probably more likely to model them. And by model them, I just mean like, you don't have to use a library. You can create the state machine implementation yourself. But what I mean is, can you ensure that transitions between different states is explicit and only the possible transitions are made possible? Yeah, there's probably a lot more that I could say about this, but that's as far as I'm going to go. So you can pretty much, when you start learning how to model state transition or your state machine, then you'll see more and more opportunities to do so. And I think it's just a matter of experience and taking the time to practice that. Okay, and we've got some chats about here. What's wrong with Yarn? Just go Google Yarn version 2, and there's probably a lot of blog posts explaining why that was they just made a bunch of trade-offs that people weren't happy with, myself included. Okay. Sweet, hooray, good stuff. Okay, we're just finishing up. Oh, cool. Let's take a look at Yago's proxy thing. Nice thing about Code Sandbox is it's really easy, a really easy way to share code that can run if you're not doing anything.
Examples.
Sorry, what?
Or reproduce examples. You know, when people create issues, it's great.
Yeah. The problem is when it doesn't work, it really doesn't work, and it's hard to know why it doesn't work. So, okay, interesting. So we've got, yeah, this is crazy. Boy, you never catch me doing this, but it is fascinating to see this. I am definitely not a fan of mutation as an API for re-rendering. This is one of the big reasons why I switched from AngularJS to React is like you mutate stuff and side effects happen. I don't like this triggering side effects, but some people love it, and that's great. That's great for them. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So we've got this proxy, and these event handlers are going to just change the values of that proxy. When those change, the setter is called, which has a re-render that will trigger a re-render because things changed, which is fascinating. It's very interesting. Yeah, here, let's add a word. Hello. This is neat. Yeah, fascinating. That's very cool, Iago. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, I don't like the mutation API too. It's just to see if I could do it. Like most of the things I do in Code Sandbox.
Iago, this is one thing I really admire about you, is that you don't care whether it's a good idea. You just go and do it, and I think that's awesome. That's where really brilliant ideas come from. So keep doing that. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so we are almost finished, I think. Okay, cool. We've got a tweet about this new hook.
No, it's really more me asking if it's a premature optimization to do so.
Oh, okay.
If you only select a part of the state, then, but yeah, it could be helpful.
Yeah. This is I think it's awesome. Maybe it is a premature optimization for sure. But yeah, it will completely replace some of my React performance. In fact, I'm thinking several of those extra credits on that React performance exercise could just like.
Do you mean when you separate the state and dispatch into two different contexts?
No, I mean the one where we have perf death by 1,000 cuts, and so I say, hey, you could separate the states into unique domains, but what if they actually are in a shared domain? We need to keep them together. Okay, well now we've got this component that's just re-rendering a ton of times when this other state changes, but this component doesn't care about that state, so it doesn't need to re-render. And so it only cares about a part of the state. And so then let's just use this use selected context hook. And now this only re-renders when it cares about the state that's being changed. Yeah, I think that's cool. That solves some of the some of those things. I got to give my emoji reaction to this thing. Woohoo! Oh, man, come on, GitHub. Why do you do that? Maybe it's actually not GitHub that does this. Okay. Anyway, we're almost done. Is it possible in the future Svelte will become more popular than React because of the easy to use API? So I can't comment too much on Svelte because I haven't actually built anything more than Hello World, and I did that in the browser, I think. So I can't really tell you. It's very difficult to for a framework as dominant as React to fall out of favor. What it takes is something that is just so vastly different and superior that people are willing to eat the cost of changing. And the problem is that the problem for Svelte to overcome is that React is just so popular and solving people's problems so well. And Svelte isn't, like, it's pretty different in many cases, like the syntax and everything, but it's not so different that like it gets people like me super excited to switch. And not to suggest that I am the like a great representation of what most people do or whatever, but yeah, I'm not sure that it's ever going to become more popular than React. An easy to use API is not what makes a maintainable application in the long term. So Svelte, I'm sure that Svelte, like, people can build maintainable apps and everything. Like, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is easy to use API is only one piece to the puzzle. And it's a very small and relatively irrelevant piece. what's most important is how simple it is and how like maintainable in the long term it can be is dependent on how simple it is.
I also think
yeah.
in regards to React being so popular, when it comes to the ecosystem, we have so many meta frameworks like Next.js, etc. So I think that's also one aspect why, or we even have pre-React.js, which is even smaller than React. So I think in that aspect, it's also like React is already, the whole ecosystem is already solving a lot of problems.
Yeah, and that ecosystem cannot be overestimated either, because the decision that React took or made on how they do things is a little different from other frameworks of its time. So like Angular was, we do everything for you. Ember was, we do everything for you. Like this includes HTTP and data management, caching, and all of that stuff. They do routing, animation, all of that. We do it in-house. Ember did the same, but React came out and said, we're just going to take this one slice and we'll be really good at this, and then we'll let the community innovate on everything else. And what's interesting about that is that it means that you have a much bigger contributor base. Now, the other frameworks are open source and people can contribute, but when you have something that is official and built in, then innovating on that is very difficult, because you can't make it like breaking changes very easily. And like you can't just suddenly say, oh, we're going to go with this different approach, unless you want to pull an Angular 2 on everybody, which did not do well for Angular. So the nice thing about React is like people are able to experiment and try totally different things. And there's the trade-off of, well, now you have community fragmentation a little bit, because people are using different solutions for different things. But it means that innovation is way stronger, because you have just so many people solving problems. And you can have a framework that solves 90% of the use cases, but once those are solved like basically pretty well, then it's very difficult to convince somebody that they shouldn't just shoehorn the baked in solution to into their problem space. And so even if it's not a really great solution for the problem that they have, they'll still use it and just make it work, because it's built in, rather than try to build their own abstraction that's better suited for their use case, and may actually be better suited for most people's use cases. And on top of that, they're less likely to contribute to the core, because it is the core, and a lot of people are afraid to do that. And so, yeah, you just wind up with less innovation. And I see Svelte as trying to do the same thing. And there are so many benefits to building everything in, right? Like a lot of people complain about, well, everybody's trying to decide which state management library I should use with React, and you know, which router. I have all these choices, and that bothers a lot of people. But you do have this this challenge where if the solution isn't perfect, you're not going to make it much better. You're just going to have to make the solution work for you. Yeah, so it's just trade-offs. And I think that because the approach that React took, it's infinitely flexible. And on top of that, React will continue to evolve to whatever UI we put UI in. So we've got like React 3 Fiber, we've got React VR, there's React Native, there's React Ink for even the terminal. There are renderers all over the place, and you'll find React everywhere. It's in your TV. It'll be in your refrigerator. It's everywhere. Yeah, PDF renderers, Iago just said in the chat. So yeah, it's all over. Yeah, so that's, I don't know. I doubt that Svelte will ever become more popular than React. And I'm on record of saying, and I still believe, that React is the last UI framework you'll need to learn. Not because nothing better will come along, but because when it does, you won't need to learn it, because it will be an AI that just builds the UI for you. So you won't need to know it. And we'll all be doing different jobs. Maybe we'll be, you know, among the stars, like in Star Trek or something. But yeah, I do believe that eventually the computers will just be making the UIs, and you won't need to know a UI framework. So I think that React will be the last one that you need to learn. Now, I mean, you could also say that Vue is the last one you need to learn. If that's what the one you want to go learn, then go for it. But yeah, anyway, those are my thoughts on that. We could probably talk about this forever. Okay. All right, sweet. I think we're done. This is fun. Thanks for hanging out. We went over by a half hour, but that's okay. We had a bunch of questions queued up and stuff. This was a good time. So office hours is every week at this time. So far, this time is working pretty well, but I may actually change it to Friday. I'm not sure. We'll see. Just keep an eye on this page. I'll keep this page updated. Yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all in the future.